What Once Was Mine, Chapter 17, Rapunzel. The moment her mother was gone, she began to pack. Isn't this exciting, Pascal? The lizard didn't answer. He tolerated her movements only because he was slung around the back of her neck like a kerchief. It was warm and soft there. He was full from a tasty egg dinner, and nothing was obviously going to kill or eat him in the next few minutes. As far as the lizard was concerned, all was good in the world, if a little nausea-inducing. Rapunzel pulled out all of her maps of Europe, of which she had exactly 3, each at least 50 years out of date. Baronies had been won, lost, or stolen, loyalties and boundaries switched around as if by magic. One of the maps had already been carefully rubbed out and re-inked in several places, but the masses never changed. The mountains, rivers, lakes, and oceans. Rapunzel had a fairly good idea what direction the floating lights were in, but not how large or how far away they were. She hoped they weren't out over the sea. On the other hand, the idea of giant antediluvian whales coming out from the depths of some unknown seasonal instinct to release golden glowing bubbles of blow into the air, well, that would be quite the thing to see too. Wincing, she carefully tore maps number 1 and number 3 out of their books, rolled them carefully, and stuck them in the satchel with the crown, which she stuck in a larger cloth bag that she usually used for keeping bread. Along with the map, she also put in food that would last. Some ends of crusty loaves, roasted and dried beans, eggs, cheese she had boiled. Since she didn't have a water skin like heroes she had in stories, she had to make do with a clay jar of water, whose lid she sealed in with wax so it wouldn't spill. She carefully rolled up the wanted poster and slid it in the corner, along the seam where it hopefully wouldn't get too crumpled. After some thought, she also threw in a quill, a tablet of ink, and 4 daubs of paint dried on a palette made out of shell, which her mother had found on her last trip to get the white pigment. Who knew? Maybe she would be inspired to paint something truly amazing she saw outside. A few treasures, including some real coins and fake ones, she had painted up for a puppet show. Rope seemed handy, but she had her hair, a small knife, a bit of hard leather for sharpening, and several large cloths she could use as cloaks, or, she whipped one around her head dramatically, to hide her giant pile of hair. Then she saw herself in the mirror. She was ridiculous. She looked like she was hiding a second, smaller Rapunzel on top of her head, crouched down, hovering herself with a blanket. Rapunzel sighed and undid it. Until she found Flynn, and probably after as well, she would have to be very, very careful. She fastened her braid around her armoire again, got up on the windowsill, and reached behind her neck to touch Pascal for good luck. Then she looked back at the room she was leaving. It seemed so small and dark, but cheerful, filled with everything that made Rapunzel, paintings and mobiles and sticks and crafts and weavings and plants and a blank mirror, which now reflected only the things in the room, not the person who lived there. Rapunzel felt strange, like she was a spirit departing an old body. It was a kind body and had done its job, but now it was a little too cramped to hold her and all her dreams. A note. She should leave a note. But what would she say? Dear Mother, I've gone to find the floating lights. I'll be back. Of course, there was no obvious sign of a struggle, so it would be immediately obvious that she had left on her own accord, and Gothel would know where she was heading. So was there any point in leaving a note at all? So she jumped. Whee! She whispered, spinning around and around as if she felt like a spider enjoying her descent. The landing on grass was even better this time, heightened by anticipation. She squealed, yanking her hair free. When she was done with a few minutes of serious twirling across the grass, she checked on the tree with the hole in it. As far as she could tell, with her extremely limited experience, none, there did not seem to be any tracks or signs of anyone else trying to find the crown. The only footprint she saw, which at first was very exciting, turned out to be her own dainty foot. As eager as she was to begin her adventure, the hidden valley around her looked a little dark, foreboding, full of rock, trees, and shadow, but somehow also empty. Mother comes and goes a lot, so there must be a path, she said aloud. And if she found the poster on the tree, it must be a path used by other people. It would be wide and easily seen. She looked around the base of the tower, keeping the tip of one finger on it. For fun? For comfort? And thus immediately discovered two things. 1. There was indeed a path, a narrow one that led through a cleft between two natural rock walls, overhung and hidden by ivy, easily missed if you don't know what you were looking for. 2. There was a door at the base of the tower. A door? Rapunzel demanded in surprise and outrage. It wasn't much of a door, honestly, more of a sort of cabinet behind, which you might put refuse or things you didn't need very often. But still, her tower had a door that she didn't even know about. On it were all sorts of angry-looking signs. Keep out. Plague. Medicants and pox victims here. Do not enter. This was confusing enough, but along with the signs, shoved in the gap between the door and its jamb, was a coat. The coat that the young man, Flynn, had been wearing, and then suddenly not been wearing. Rapunzel frowned at the mystery and tried opening the door. It was locked, of course. Rapunzel's frown deepened. Was Flynn trying to use his jacket to somehow open a locked door? If so, maybe he wasn't that sort of clever adventurer she needed. Or, wait, was he actually super, super clever? What if he was being pursued by the king and queen whose crown he'd stolen, picked the lock on the door, took off his jacket, and shoved it into the doorway to make it look like he had somehow gone inside, and let his coat be caught in his haste? How many people would follow a man into a tower that had plague warnings all over it? Even if they stood there trying to figure out what to do, Flynn would have bought himself precious extra minutes to escape. No, Rapunzel thought smugly. She was right to choose Flynn as her guide. This was precisely the sort of survival-minded, sneaky fellow she required. Not that she had much of a choice in the whole guide business. She left the coat where it was, after snaking an arm around one of the sleeves just to see how it would fit her, out of curiosity, and headed down the path. She did wonder about the door, however. The tower was too narrow for any except the steepest stairs, and anyway, if there was a way up, why did Gothel insist on using her hair? Laziness? Or was there some other reason? Like not wanting Rapunzel to know there was an easy entrance and exit to the tower. Of course, Gothel had managed to get up there somehow when Rapunzel was younger and her hair was shorter, but she couldn't quite remember how, and she'd never questioned it. The whole thing was strange. Her ramifications didn't last too long, however. Soon she was pushing aside the curtains of ivy, passing through the cleft, and stepping into the forest proper. It wasn't as dark as it looked from above. In fact, it opened up into a trail as big as a road, she assumed, never actually having seen a road. Strange straight marks deep in the softer dirt were probably made by wheels from a cart or wagon. On either side of the trail, moss and pretty little flowers mounded around giant squat trees with large leaves and friendly faces on the patterns of their bark. Light broke through the canopy of the forest in glittery patches, and tiny songbirds called, dancing in the branches. A small furry creature Rapunzel was pretty sure was a moose, like the one that had gotten caught in her tower, regarded her from a branch with its feral black eyes. "Hello," Rapunzel cried happily. The thing let loose a high-pitched string of what sounded like a swear word and took off its bushy tail shaking. Pascal's feet dug into his mistress's neck. Moose were herbivores, of course. Squirrels, on the other hand, were opportunists who could not turn down a helpless fledgling or injured lizard. "And to you, too," she called, curtsying. "All right. I can't be certain which way Flynn Rider went, so I'll just take the direction that leads sort of in the direction of the floating lights. If we see someone, Pascal, we'll ask." The day was young, and the sky above the trees was blue. She almost skipped, and wished she let her hair trail behind her, as it was so desperately wanted, gloriously free in silver, but, just in case, she kept it tight up. There were so many things to see, and touch, and talk to. She could have spent a lifetime on the first mile. She would have spent nearly 20 years in 2 rooms. Trees, for instance, were all different when you got up close. The painter in her was appalled at how thoughtlessly she copied onto her walls what she thought was a good imitation of life. In reality, they had differently shaped leaves, different shades of bark, brown bark, and gray and black and even silver and white bark. differently gnarled roots and patterns of branches. Also intriguing were the plants that were neither tree nor grass. She knew logically that they were bushes, but kept staring at them up close, wondering if they have preferred to be trees or grass. These strange in-between things. One was a wild rose. She recognized that from her books. But no pictures could have prepared her for the heady scent that enveloped her from blossoms caught in a ray of warm sunlight. There were more insects on her mind could probably wrap itself around. "Oh, look, Pascal!" she cried, spying something that didn't look like the rest of the forest. A regular shape in stark shades stood out against the fuzzy, organic background. It was another wanted poster. Wanted, Flynn Rider, dead or alive. To be clear, dead is perfectly acceptable. "We must be on the right track if they're looking for him here, too," she said happily, tearing the poster down. Then she frowned regarding it. "This one is a different drawing of his face. Look, the nose is even bigger." She carefully rolled up the poster and put it in her bag next to the first one. There were recognizable tracks on the ground here, and fresher. Many were large and deep, like a shoe or boot-wearing woman had made them. Or men, Rapunzel realized. Honestly, except for herself and her mother, she had no bias for comparison. The land slowly began to change as she walked. Clearings became small meadows. The path grew flatter and more densely packed, and she got her first real look at any human structure besides her own tower, a rickety wooden fence that bordered a road intersecting with her own. Above the first post, swinging from chains, was a carved and painted sign of a beautiful golden duck. "The Snuggly Duckling," Rapunzel read breathlessly. It was more or less that what she herself would name an establishment given the choice. This was probably a tavern, or public house, or inn, something for weary travelers to stop in, like in fairy tales. Certainly a patron here could help her find Flynn. She straightened her dress and kerchief that hid some of her hair and followed the trail to a friendly-looking building. It was so old that a giant tree had grown partially into it and draped over the roof like a protective arm. The original structure had obviously been added on to haphazardly as space, in time and tree permitted. Several large animals were tied up outside. "Horses!" Rapunzel cried, recognizing the fairy tale creatures at once. She threw her arms open and was about to hug one mightily around its beautiful chestnut neck, but stopped herself at the last moment. "No, Rapunzel, you're on a mission," she told herself sternly. "Go in and ask about Flynn. Floating lights first, hugging horses later." And firmly resolved, she drew herself up into what she supposed was a dignified and respectable pose and approached the duckling. Any reluctance she had to enter an unknown situation ended the moment she drew close. It sounded like the most magical place in the world. There were loud voices telling unintelligible stories, the merely plink of an instrument, some people singing one song, others another, peals of heavy laughter. Without even thinking about a life she had been denied, Rapunzel threw open the door with expectation and abandon. All immediately became silent. Her large eyes grew even larger as she took in the scene that confronted her. It was not at all like she had imagined. The giant room was dark, chaotic, filled with enormous men in dark clothes. These men gaped at her, scar-faced, pop-eyed, bald, hairy, bearded, beardless, muscled, weaponed. She was the only point of color in the entire place, her lavender dress framed by the bright outdoor light that bent and rayed around her figure. From the looks of it, she might have been the only colorful thing to have ever been inside the Snuggly Duckling. Despite its shiny yellow ducky sign, some of the patrons seemed to actually wince at the garishness of her outfit. Or maybe it was her hair. Rapunzel swallowed briefly, succumbing to the wash of different emotions. Fear, certainly. Stage fright, definitely. But mostly guilt and embarrassment. She hadn't wanted their gay singing and laughter to stop, and certainly didn't want to be the cause of its stopping. Had she done something wrong? Was this a private party? Was Snuggly Duckling the name of a family? Was this a men-only establishment? No, she could see a couple of dangerous-looking women in the mix, and several serving drinks. "What's a nice lass like you doing in a place like this?" one of the men asked. He He had a nasty smile and wore a little metal cap with horns and curved around and out on either side of its head. Its points were sharpened and looked like fangs from something that would grow on a cow or a sheep or a camel. Rapunzel had no idea what kind of horns they were, only that large, cuddly animals had once worn them. He flicked a fingernail along an evil-looking blade, slicing off moon-shaped bits of a nail. "All alone?" another man asked, this one with a huge nose. He had a hand on his sword. "In a fancy dress," one of the women said pointedly. "With a pouch full of gold coins, no doubt." "I wouldn't touch her." This was said with some finality by the scariest member of the crowd, a man with a broad, bald pate and a hook for his left hand. He turned his back to Rapunzel and very obviously sipped his beer, ending any potential interaction. "She a lady or a noble, nothing but trouble. Even if you try to return her to her parents for a reward, they'll just as soon gut an honest thug as pay him whatever he deserves." The crowd, thugs, ruffians, Rapunzel could put words to them now, and someone else had suggested it, began to mutter. Sounds of reluctant agreement, disappointed noises, grunts. They all turned their backs on her, resumed their previous drinking and activities and discussions. "Wait, I'm not a lost lady." That sounded a little strange, but she decided to just press on. "I'm not looking for help or my parents or anything. I'm looking for him." And with that, she dramatically pulled out the poster of Flynn, unfurling it with a snap of her wrist. She waited for the appropriate reaction. Everybody in the Snuggly Duckling began laughing at her all at once. "Flynn Rider?" one of the women hooted, cackling. "You're looking for Flynn Rider?" "You and the Stabbingtons," the man with the big nose cried, panting from his hysterics. "You and the king and queen," a man whose muffled voice echoed from underneath a metal helm said. He was giggling. "You and everyone in the kingdom who wants the reward," the man with the horns roared. Rapunzel looked at him, and then her poster. A single silver hair had loosened itself from whatever knot, braid, or bun it had been bound to. She shoved it back immediately and forcefully. Not out of the usual irritation that came with the stray tendril, but the fear that came from a lifetime of worry about accidentally killing things with it. "I'm not looking for a reward," she explained carefully. "I want to hire him for a job." "No, you don't," the man with the hook for a hand said almost kindly, but still without turning back around. "You really don't want to. Free piece of advice, miss. Go on back home or wherever you came from." "Wait, please!" But the chatter and discussion she had been so sorry to interrupt before started up again, in no regard for her presence or predicament. This was a really strange movement for a girl who had spent her 19 years in a tower by herself with only one other person to talk to. There she had been forgotten and ignored by an indifferent world, cut off by walls around her. But there she had never been actively ignored by anything. Okay, maybe Gothel, a little, much less a crowd of strangers. Excuse me," she said, waving her hand, trying to get her attention. "Hello, I need help." Her quick eyes saw coins being pushed across the bar, cloth pouches of silver and gold changing hands. She thought about the repeated mention of rewards, both of the one on the poster for Flynn Rider's capture and the one the thug assumed would be offered for her return to her parents. Apparently to get anything done in this outside world, or the Snuggly Duckling at least, you need money. "Listen, I can pay. I'll pay someone to take me to him. I have, let's see." She dug around to the bottom of her bag. "A couple of 6-sided coins, a coin with a hole in it, a slice of wood my mother brought me that kind of looks like a coin. I painted a face on it. Oh, here's a little dragon I carved." "Oh, go away," the man with the hook said, waving his hook backward to her like a pesky fly. "No one wants your trash." "I'll take you to Flynn." The words rang out heroically over the rabble. Rapunzel was momentarily dazzled by one of the thugs, muscled and comely, striking a heroic pose on top of the table, chin out, ivory teeth sparkling, hands on hips. The rest of the thugs rolled their eyes at this and continued talking. "Okay, yes, thank you, finally, yes," Rapunzel said, trying not to jump up and down with excitement. Which coins will you do it for, if you please? First, tell me, what do you need Flynn for? The girl leapt down from the table. Her dark hair hung in a single braid down her back, wrapped in an end by a leather thong. She was even shorter than Rapunzel. I need a sneaky thief to lead me on a valiant quest. I can sneak, the girl said, slamming her gloved fist down on the table on a display that was far less subtle than she might have wanted. What's he got that I don't? A poster advertising his famous exploits? Rapunzel ventured, holding it up as evidence. The girl crossed her arms and looked piqued. You got me there. I'm just starting out, though. He's been in this thuggery business for a while. All right, I'll do it. I'll take you to him. It'll look good on my resume. Beef it up a little bit for future jobs. Rapunzel tried to interrupt, but it was like all had been decided, and the girl was doing her a favor. The name's Gina. She stuck out her hand. Rapunzel stared at it, unsure what to do. I'm Rapunzel. Huh, weird name. Okay, Gina said. Buy me a drink so we can discuss details. Rapunzel wasn't sure what she meant by details. She had said that what she wanted, to be taken to Flint Rider. What else was there to say? But the idea of sidling up to a bar and ordering something like a real adult human was entrancing. The two girls pushed their way through the throng. Wow, I really like your, arm painting, Rapunzel said to the man in the metal helmet as they squeezed by him. The picture was of a cupcake, with that looked like a whisk and a spoon crossed in front of it. I love making cupcakes on rainy days when I'm feeling down. Of course, she couldn't see the expression of his face as he turned to watch her go, and it was very hard to hear him whisper over the background noise. She knows. Finally, someone gets it.